It was a chilly evening in early March a few years ago when I finally dragged myself home from a late shift. The hour was close to midnight and I was beyond exhausted. All I could think about was how good it would feel to crack open a cold beer and sink into the comfort of my couch. After a day that seemed endless, there's something about that first sip of a cold drink that just takes the edge off. As I eased back, drink in hand, I let my eyes close for a moment, feeling the weight of the day slip away. Life felt like a constant uphill climb, and I needed this brief, quiet moment to just breathe. I switched on the TV and started flipping through channels, but nothing seemed worth watching. The mindless scrolling was more frustrating than relaxing, so I gave up and set the remote aside, deciding I'd rather just enjoy the silence for a while. But not even 10 seconds had passed when, suddenly, the entire house plunged into darkness. That all too familiar pop that comes right before the power cuts out, it's one of the worst sounds. Unfortunately, losing power at random has been an issue with this house for as long as I can remember, though that didn't make it any less irritating. Curious whether the power outage was widespread or just my own bad luck, I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside to check if the neighboring houses were also affected. It was late, and the neighborhood was quiet, with only one other house on the street showing any light in its windows, confirming that my house was the only one without power. That was a little strange, but still nothing that seemed worth worrying about. I turned back toward my front door, only to realize that it was locked. Confused, I tried the handle a few more times, twisting and tugging, but it wouldn't budge. I called out, hoping my wife might be awake, but got no answer. Feeling a pang of annoyance, I made my way around the back to try the other door. To my surprise, that door was locked too. Normally, she leaves it unlocked whenever I'm out late. Then as I turned to retrace my steps, something caught my eye that made my stomach drop. The garden hose. I had left it coiled up neatly on the porch earlier that day, but now it was sprawled haphazardly across the grass, directly beneath the breaker box on the side of the house. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. As I cautiously approached the side of the house, it dawned on me. Someone had tampered with the breaker, cutting the power on purpose. My heart began to race as I processed what that meant. Moving quickly and as quietly as possible, I peered through the nearest window. In the darkness inside, two beams of light swept across the rooms. I could see shadows moving, rummaging through my belongings with an unnerving calmness. A mixture of anger and dread welled up in me, but when I reached into my pocket for my phone, my heart sank even further. I'd left it on the couch before stepping outside. Frustrated, I muttered a curse under my breath. My first thought was to run to the neighbor's house to borrow a phone, but then a sickening thought struck me. My wife was inside, likely asleep and completely unaware of the danger. Desperation took over as I began frantically searching for a way to alert her without drawing the intruder's attention. I picked up a handful of rocks and started throwing them at our bedroom window, hoping to wake her up. After the third try, I saw her groggy face peer out, her expression quickly shifting to alarm as I urgently gestured for her to open the window. I quickly explained the situation in hushed tones, telling her to get into the closet and stay hidden until I gave the all clear. Thankfully, she didn't hesitate and slipped away to hide. Now that I knew she was safe, at least for the moment, I sprinted across the street to our neighbors, who kindly let me use their phone to call the police. The waiting was agonizing. I stayed on their porch, straining my ears for any sounds from my house, praying that my wife would be safe and that help would arrive soon. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the police finally pulled up. I briefed them as best as I could, and they moved swiftly toward the house. But by the time they entered, it was too late. The intruders had already fled. They'd taken whatever valuables they could grab in a hurry and left the rest in disarray. I found my wife shaken and pale, understandably terrified. She recounted what she'd heard from her hiding spot in the closet. Right after she'd climbed in, she heard footsteps approaching our bedroom door. The door was kicked open, and she heard someone cock a gun, as if they were listening for any movement. I'm convinced they must have heard the rocks I'd thrown, which probably made them think someone was outside watching. Whatever the reason, they left just before the police arrived. In the days that followed, the experience replayed in my mind over and over again. There are